No, 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 no.
Oh my God.
So traditionally, key decision makers have not thought of childcare as a core priority.
It's not valued by governments or by society.
There's a lot of conversation around public health, education, macroeconomic growth and stability. The irony is, of course, that care is critical to each of those objectives.
Women still bear most of the brunt of childcare work, and this really impacts their professional development. We're talking about why women leave the workforce, why they need to take a step back, why there is an income gap.
I've realized that I became a voice to the voiceless. I was able to not only help, but fill the gap of the parents who wanted to go to work.
If you want thriving citizens and thriving communities and thriving economies and thriving countries, you need to start by investing in the youngest generation.
By ignoring care pre-COVID, we're now in this mess.
Childcare is not only necessary, but it makes economic sense.
There are 350 million children around the world who need childcare and don't have access to it. And until we reach those 350 million children, our work is not done.
No matter what country or region you look at, women do the disproportionate share of unpaid childcare and broader care work.
Macho.
The latest data we have is from 2018 from the International Labor Organization, and it tells us that upwards of 600 million women were not able to work because of childcare responsibilities. That's in contrast to about 40 million men.
A lot of the work that has been done around childcare focuses on the child, and we really try to look at the role that childcare can play for women.
Where's the baby? You see a baby where?
That's part of the reason why we conceptualized the Childcare Dividend initiative. In order to do this, we did a social media analysis where we looked at over 15 million tweets to understand who is driving the conversation around childcare and what are the topics that they're engaging with.
It's also women who are doing the lion's share of paid care work.
Awesome. That's
it.
Scene one, take one.
And this is work that tends to be fairly unrecognized and undervalued, and therefore undercompensated.
What we found is that almost 50% of the tweets are about accessibility. 60% of children that need childcare do not have access to it. And about 8 out of 10 of these children are in low-income and mid-income countries. The second issue was quality. Even if people have access, they want to ensure that their kids are safe and that the quality of childcare is better than what mothers are able to provide. The third issue that we looked at was affordability. This was a particularly important issue in developing countries. We know that women in the United States spend about 30% of their median income in childcare.
I started this because I had a child with special needs and I couldn't find childcare. So my mom was getting older and I was like, you know, maybe I can go to work, start a childcare facility, and you take care of my daughter and I'll help. I'm full all the time because I'm located in an area that's downtown DC. So guess what? Not only do I have parents who live here who wants to come to my facilities, but I have parents who work downtown who need to come to my facility. A parent has to be able to afford it. Everybody who lives in America wants the American dream. But it's hard when you try to have a family and have that work-life balance. So I've realized that I became a voice to the voiceless. I was able to not only help, but fill the gap of the parents who wanted to go to work.
Most of the messages that we analyzed in the United States were focusing on how unaffordable childcare is. The private sector has sort of taken over childcare. The government has only started talking about providing childcare subsidies or providing childcare tax credits for families, but it hasn't really taken the responsibility as you see in some European countries and some Nordic countries. So there what you have in the end is this incredible unaffordable childcare.
We see pennies on the dollar, if that, going to supporting the provision of affordable and high-quality care, in contrast to investments in things like the extractives industry, things like public health and education. And while some of those areas of development are obviously critical and investment needs to continue, we need to start to elevate care to put it on par as a development priority with those other areas.
You heard that? Can you hear it? You can?
We don't get paid enough to do what we do. We have to still take care of our family. We want the American dream. But they were paying like $8, not even an hour a day to support a child.
One at a time. $8.
We love the children, right? But I can't call the bank and say, hey, I love my kids, I don't have my mortgage today. And you're asking a child care educator to be in the midst of being a social worker, a doctor, a lawyer, a therapist. I mean, we wear many hats.
Has the final say? Jehovah has the final say. Jehovah turns my life around.
It was more than a decade ago that the idea of Kidogo came about. I was working in Kenya with a large nonprofit and had gone out to an informal settlement or slum, and they mentioned the word baby care, and they decided to show me one. We walked through the winding alleyways of the slum. We got to this unmarked property. I opened the door. The smell was overwhelming. And as I inched forward, my foot hit something. And I saw 15, 20, maybe more babies in this 10-foot by 10-foot corrugated metal shack, all awake, but completely silent. They were so severely neglected. They knew that crying wouldn't get them anything. And yet parents are paying for this, up to $1 per day, because there's simply no better option. And that's why we started Kidogo.
In low-income countries, the childcare gap is huge. So the first thing that governments need to do is to invest in childcare infrastructure. People need access.
No matter how big we get as an organization, we will never be able to reach every child. And so we need to help influence the larger system to make childcare a priority.
It is very important the government still think of childcare as a public good and take on the responsibility of providing universal childcare. 80% of the workforce in low-income countries are informal workers who often don't have access to social programs because they're not formally employed. They're also not the poorest of the poor, so they don't have access to some of the cash transfers that the poorest receive, but they're not able to afford childcare. So how can you provide solutions that encompass all of these families?
When I stumbled across that first childcare center, I think the question came, was this an issue just in that one community, or was this something more pervasive? And so we did a whole bunch of interviews across 3 or 4 informal settlements with parents to understand their pain points, with these other childcare or baby care operators, and we realized that this was indeed an issue across Nairobi's informal settlements. And then we went a little bit further and thought, if this is an issue in the slums of Kenya, it's got to be an issue in the slums of India and Colombia and other places around the world. How were others tackling this issue of quality, affordable childcare?
Organizations like Kidogo are well positioned to be able to speak to the reality that women, children, and their families are experiencing day to day, and the gaps that need to be filled in terms of financing and policy reform to support quality childcare.
Maskio.
350 million children around the world need childcare but don't have access to it. And the majority of them are living in low-income countries. And so what is a model, what is an approach that will actually make a dent on this problem?
Sitting here in Washington with our connections to people at the World Bank, the IMF, the Inter-American Development Bank, we serve as an intermediary between those folks on the ground who have such an intimate understanding of what's needed and those institutions with an opportunity to support that change.
Kidogo iliingia kwa maisha yangu na njia ya kunielimisha, imenielimisha kuhusu kulea watoto kwa njia inayofaa.
It's been incredible to see the progress and the growth of Kidogo, but until we reach those 350 million children, our work is not done.
It's a dilemma for many women, choosing between bad childcare or not working and staying at home to take care of her children.
The fact of the matter is, and especially when we're thinking in terms of low-income populations, most women are already working. They have no other choice. These are women who need to find informal, sometimes low-quality arrangements because there are not those accessible, affordable, quality options provided to them.
There's a lack of affordable childcare available for women, especially in low and middle income countries. They're leaving them in conditions that are not necessarily fit for early childhood development or learning.
There are an estimated 5,000 of these informal daycares in the urban slums of Nairobi alone. The problem is quality. In Kenya, like in many other countries in the world, they are in one of three situations. Either home alone, they're with a neighbor or a sibling, usually a girl who's been pulled out of school, or, in the third case, an informal, unregulated, unlicensed childcare center that often is doing more harm than good.
Kabla nianze kazi ya join Kidogo, nilikuwa bado nalea watoto lakini sikuwa nawalea kwa njia inayofaa.
All parents want the best for their child, and whether we're in Kenya or whether we're in the US, whether we're in Nairobi or whether we're in Washington, it shouldn't matter. Every child deserves to have the best start to life.
Process the information you're gonna need to succeed in life. And they always say they want a quality care. How do you measure quality? By everything that we're doing.
For kids who are born in low-income communities, who are locked away because their moms have to work, or who are put in these congested daycares, they don't get to be kids. This idea of providing a safe, stimulating environment for children no matter where they are is important.
There are people who work on childcare from the perspective of gender equality, and there's another group that works on these issues from the perspective of early childhood development. Then when COVID hit, we saw care come to the fore as the binding constraint, forcing women to leave the workforce and make them unable to return.
The lockdowns made that invisible work visible, and it also made it evident that women still hold a big part of the work involving childcare.
I do see a number of tectonic shifts happening in the childcare sector since the pandemic, and I hope that this is a trend that will continue.
We ignite the economy and the world. Without us, they can't grow. Let parents have an opportunity and a choice. We're about choices. It's a democracy.
this will have positive returns on economic development.
And ensure that key decision makers at institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, USAID are paying attention.
We hope the initiative is able to bring together a wealth of stakeholders to find a solution to this problem.
We call ourselves impatient optimists because we're optimistic that things will and have in the past changed towards gender equality.
We can create communities and countries of opportunity, and I think we can do that by investing in the earliest generation. And it's a smart investment to provide quality, affordable childcare to all.